Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to help you get right to the heart of complex ideas.
That's right, making sense of it all without drowning in the details.
And today we are focusing on a specific piece, the Season 1 finale of Diedrich Byrne's podcast, Digital EQ Reimagined.
The episode called Digital EQ Reimagined Reflection. It's quite revealing.
Exactly. So for you listening, someone who wants the core message without, wading through hours of content, our mission here is simple.
We want to unpack what Burns is really reflecting on in this finale, understand why it matters.
And crucially, see how it all ties back to his own personal journey, which he says is the foundation for the whole season, the whole podcast, really.
Yeah, he makes it clear this isn't just theory. This finale is deeply personal. It's kind of the origin story unpacked.
Okay, so let's dive in. Burns starts by saying this whole project, the podcast, it didn't just appear out of nowhere. No sudden flash.
No, not at all. He talks about this persistent inner feeling, a kind of nagging voice telling him he couldn't keep up the act anymore.
The act of fitting in, of meeting external expectations.
Precisely. He felt he was molding himself, and it just became unsustainable. So he made this huge decision.
To walk away.
Yeah, to walk away from the life he'd built, basically shedding an entire identity he'd constructed.
Wow. And he doesn't sugarcoat what came next. He calls it a terrifying, bottomless, lonely silence.
And that honesty is really striking, isn't it? It wasn't some, peaceful yoga retreat.
Right.
It was stark.
Yeah.
Confronting the lack of an authentic self because he'd been so defined by what others thought.
And that, for you listening, is maybe a key starting point he identifies. Change often starts when you finally admit that deep internal misalignment, that disconnect.
Definitely. And in that really uncomfortable silence, he has this big realization.
Which is?
That his own emotions felt, foreign. Like they were inherited, engineered, managed, not actually his.
That's a heavy thought, to feel like your own feelings aren't, yours.
Incredibly heavy. And that's the real pivot, I think. He starts asking, how many of us just run on these emotional programs we've never really looked at? And this feeling, this realization, it fuels the big question, driving his whole exploration.
Which is just so powerful. If those feelings aren't mine, then who am I underneath them?
Exactly.
It forces you, the listener, to stop and think about your own emotional foundations. Where did your feelings come from?
Right. It's unsettling, sure, but potentially freeing, too. It pushes you to look deeper than the surface.
Okay, so he asks this fundamental question, and then the hard work begins, the rebuilding.
And he's really clear. No magic bullet, no sudden aha moment.
Instead, it was what he calls brutal, a solitary process. He actually mentions Googling terms like emotional numbness and why can't I cry?
Which is just so human, isn't it? It paints this picture of someone searching, maybe desperately, for answers in the dark online.
Yeah, it really resonates, and it highlights that truth about growth. It's often messy, slow, and feels pretty isolating. Not like the movies.
No, definitely not. He also talks about feeling let down by, expensive workshops.
Oh, right, the ones promising big transformation.
Yeah, promising healing and soul scarcity, as he puts it, which sounds quite cynical. He felt they were superficial.
So instead, he had to kind of scrape things together himself.
That's the picture he paints, pulling bits from neuroscience behind a paywall, trying to decipher emotional intelligence buried under academic language.
Finding scraps of humanity from research papers and podcasts, it sounds exhausting.
It does. And it really emphasizes how hard it can be to find a clear path, a map, for this kind of deep emotional work. The resources are fragmented, often inaccessible.
Right. And it seems like through this struggle, this piecing things together, he starts seeing a bigger picture.
He arrives at this quite critical view. He says, the systems we were told would protect us, they don't.
That's a strong statement. What systems is he talking about?
Well, he doesn't name specific institutions necessarily, but more the cultural systems, the ones that reward performance, not presence.
Oh.
The ones that, he argues, shame, vulnerability, and call it strength. Or even turn feelings into metrics and your pain into a profit model.
Wow. Okay. That's a pretty sharp critique of, a lot of modern life. Work culture, maybe. Social media.
It seems to encompass a lot of that. He's suggesting these pressures to perform, to always be on and strong, they actually disconnect us from ourselves emotionally.
And realizing this makes him question himself even more deeply.
Yeah, he starts asking things like, why do I feel guilty just for being tired? Why did I grow up believing love has to be earned?
Why did I think being silent meant I was strong?
Exactly. He sees these aren't just personal quirks. They're beliefs absorbed from the systems he's now critiquing.
And this all builds to his, I guess, central thesis.
I think so. It's quite a conclusion. This world wasn't built for emotional sovereignty. It was built to keep you small, silent, and self-editing.
Whoa. Okay, let's pause on emotional sovereignty. What does he mean by that exactly?
Good question. In this context, it seems to mean having real agency over your own emotional life, understanding your feelings, expressing them authentically, not just managing them to fit in or please others.
Got it. So the world, he argues, is set up to make you manage your emotions.
Not for your peace, he says, but for their convenience. The convenience of the system, the external world.
That's a challenging idea, that there are forces actively working against our authentic emotional lives.
It is provocative. He's suggesting we're subtly trained to prioritize how we appear over how we actually feel.
So understanding this becomes his motivation, his turning point.
Absolutely. It fuels this decision to, as he puts it, unlearn everything, to start defining strengths for himself.
On his own terms.
Exactly. And making his voice mattered even when it was shaking. That's a powerful image.
It really is. And committing to naming my emotions, not the ones I was allowed to have, but the ones I had buried.
It's about reclaiming that inner authority, moving away from seeking external validation and trusting his own internal compass, even when it's difficult.
And this whole struggle, this personal battle, is what led to the podcast Digital EQ Reimagined.
That's what he says. He makes it very clear. Not because I had the answers, but because I refused to keep asking permission to exist.
So it wasn't about being the expert on the mountain.
Not at all. It was about sharing the process, the questioning, admitting he didn't have all the answers, which honestly makes it more relatable.
Yeah, I can see that. He uses this incredible metaphor, too.
Oh, the raft.
Yeah. I was drowning, and instead of going under, I built a raft, and then I lit that raft up so others could see their way through the dark.
It's beautiful, isn't it? It just perfectly captures turning personal struggle into something that might help someone else. Empathy-driven.
And he stresses the goal wasn't like going viral or anything. It was the message itself, helping others navigate their own darkness. Okay, then he shifts a bit to talk about the cost, the price you pay.
Right, and he looks at both sides of it. First, the cost of choosing this path of emotional sovereignty, of authenticity.
What does he say that cost is?
Things like walking away from comfort, the familiar. Shedding your mask, which could be scary.
Being fully yourself in a world that often wants you to be simpler, less complex.
Exactly. He acknowledges these are real challenges, real costs. It can feel risky.
But then he flips it.
Yeah, he says, let's look at the cost of not doing that. The cost of hiding, of pretending.
What's that cost?
He talks about the toll of teaching your nervous system to be silent when it's screaming, constantly suppressing your true self.
Oof. That sounds exhausting too, just in a different way.
It does. And that leads him to ask you, the listener, this really direct question. Which cost are you willing to pay?
It's powerful because it reframes it. Not easy versus hard, but different kinds of hard. Visible costs versus hidden internal costs.
Precisely. And he's open about his own journey continuing. He admits he still sometimes feels the pull to put the mask back on.
But he's aware of it now.
Right. It's a conscious awareness.
Yeah.
And his commitment, he says, is to keep choosing truth, resistance, even laying his wounds bare if it helps others.
That ongoing honesty makes it feel very real, not like he's reached some perfect state.
Totally. It makes the whole idea of emotional sovereignty feel like a practice, not a destination. Constant intention.
So towards the end, he zooms out a bit, gets broader.
Yeah, there's this stark warning. He says something like, dystopia isn't coming, it's already here. In certain ways, perhaps related to emotional suppression and tech.
Seems like it. But he doesn't leave it there, does he? There's hope, too.
No, definitely hope. He talks about the possibility of a renaissance if enough people start reclaiming their emotional selves before the machine eats us whole.
The machine, presumably being these systems, maybe technology, that encourage inauthenticity.
That seems to be the implication. And he commits to keep offering tools, journals, fire, love, resources for this journey.
And his final sign-off for the season is pretty memorable.
It is. Stay digitally sovereign, stay digitally smart, and remember stronger emotions, not stronger algorithms.
That really encapsulates it, prioritizing our inner human experience in this digital age.
A powerful call to action, really. It's not just self-help. It's positioning emotional authenticity as almost resistance.
So, wrapping up our deep dive into this finale, Digital EQ Reimagined reflection. We've really traced Burns' arc
Yeah, from that initial disconnect and feeling like his emotions were managed,
through that brutal rebuilding and critiquing the systems around
to
him.
this call for emotional sovereignty, for choosing authenticity despite the costs.
It really ties the whole season together through his personal lens. It feels less like a lecture, more like a shared journey.
Absolutely. And I think what hits home is that vulnerability.
Yeah.
He's not claiming to be perfect, just sharing what he's learned navigating it himself.
And that core message he offers is pretty profound. You are not broken. You are not too much. You've just been gaslit by systems that were never made for your wholeness.
That's incredibly validating for anyone who's ever felt like they didn't quite fit the mold.
It really is. Which leads us to maybe a final thought for you, the listener, something to chew on from all this. Inspired by Burns' conclusion. What parts of your own emotional life, your own reactions or beliefs, have you just accepted as normal without asking where they actually came from?
Or how they might be impacting your well-being, your sense of wholeness.
Yeah. And building on his question about cost, what might happen if you started to really count the cost, not in money or status, but in terms of your own emotional sovereignty, your own inner peace?
The big question. Definitely something worth reflecting on long after this conversation ends.